About how mental illness affects many people. I think the key is that it affects people unexpectedly often. Sometimes those we might least expect, often those who appear to have everything, which I think is one of the things, and often with no obvious external symptoms, and that would be me, for example. So I've got a lovely wife, great kid, I had an exciting, very, very challenging job in a tier 1 company, no financial worries, no obvious stresses, no obvious issues in that sense except the normal ones. So what could possibly go wrong? Well, as it turned out, pretty much everything. I was finishing a very major restructuring project for a tier 1 FTSE top 10 organisation that was incredibly exhausting, incredibly difficult, very, very full on. At the same time as which my sister was dying in Australia. I was the only person who could go over for a whole host of domestic reasons, so I was commuting to and from Australia for 7 weeks whilst this happened. I was the only one there when she died. Her husband got trapped in traffic, it was awful, so I was the only one present there. Came back, went straight back to work. Took on 2 more fairly major deliverables on top of everything else I was already working on, trying to help the family come to terms with everything and the fact that they felt guilty that they hadn't been there, the whole hit, the usual stuff. I then took on another full-time job on top of the one I was doing because a colleague of mine who was a close friend was ill. He had a heart problem, had to go off for 3 months. And he was leading an extremely public, very, very big, very, very emotive change exercise that was failing. It was all over the place. So I got asked to parachute in and sort it out. So I did. So I fixed that on top of everything else I was doing. I was then asked to do a couple of specials for the group HRD. By specials in that organisation, we meant Secret Squirrel, very, sort of common things. So did those. My end of year feedback that year said that nobody quite understood how on earth I'd managed to do it all. And I got a really good bonus. So great. And then I fell over, completely fell apart. I stopped being able to think, my synapses wouldn't link, I couldn't answer the phone, I couldn't return faulty goods to a shop, silly thing, my child, who was about 3 at the time, had something that was broken, it needed to go back, couldn't take it back to the shop, couldn't talk to the shop assistant. This is somebody who's dealing with global issues right across the whole, company, big change things. Couldn't go to a shop, couldn't buy a suit, couldn't plan, couldn't open my inbox, struggled to get up in the morning. I started to get odd looks from peers at work for obvious reasons. Most of the time I was talking complete gobbledygook. Those who work with me will know that that's a regular occurrence, but anyway. And I was missing things all the time. Dropping things, turning up at meetings unprepared, the whole hit. It was just absolutely classic. And I completely abdicated rather than leading my team. So they were just all at sea because they were just sort of having to do everything, including carry me. Eventually, after the inevitable happened and a few conversations with my boss, who was brilliant, we agreed that I needed a complete rest and I would take a couple of weeks off. 6 months later, I went back. The second I stopped, I had a full-on, complete collapse. It was just as if my brain, my body shut down completely. It was overwhelming. It's incredibly difficult to describe because it is completely and utterly full on. And it's almost, the more active, the more involved and all of those things you are, the more it hits you. It was amazing. The worst things for me were the embarrassment, the humiliation I felt, the guilt, letting people down, the sense of failure. I should be able to cope. I'd always coped. I could do all of these things. Why couldn't I? It was the complete incomprehension. I just didn't understand what was happening or had happened to me. The lassitude I had and the complete and utter powerlessness. It was really, really strange. It's difficult to put into words, but I couldn't do anything. And I mean absolutely anything. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't get dressed. I couldn't exercise. I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't take any form of responsibility at all. A decision was just utterly beyond me. So the trouble was, because I hadn't read any of my signs, I hadn't asked for any help, I tried to keep going as if nothing was happening. So the crash was greater for me because it was just as if I'd driven straight into a wall. I was diagnosed with PTSD, depression, stress, anxiety, topped up with panic attacks. So it was pretty full on, it was pretty major. What ultimately allowed me to rebuild was a combination of all the things that we've heard about today from all the other speakers. I had a fantastic GP, I got great professional counselling, I had a brilliant home support network, and never underestimate the impact depression has on families and how dependent people are on them. And I had really strong support from work, and that's the core of what we're talking about today. They were absolutely excellent. So they provided space and an umbilical back into the business, which was pretty key, through a single point of contact, which was my boss. She had amazing emotional intelligence, which was helped, and she recognised that I hadn't become useless or stupid overnight. She worked with me. She let me go in when I was starting to get a bit better. She let me test out my recovery in a variety of ways. But the key was that I felt constantly supported, constantly wanted, and constantly valued, and that people had a genuine concern for my well-being, and that was hugely powerful. So when it was time to go back, she helped me provide a glide path with a phased return and some quick wins, which really made a difference, because the going back into a full-on job would have been a bit of a challenge. We slid me back in, and we were able to ratchet things up sensibly. If anything, they were a bit overprotective at that point, and it became quite a battle in terms of me trying to stretch myself and push the boundaries, and them trying to say, are you sure, are you sure, are you sure? So it was incredibly hard going back, and that's the key point that I think that we need to pick up on. And amongst all of this is when you are trying to bring people back into the workplace, how you go about that really, really matters. Getting the balance between recuperating, testing myself, proving to me and to others that I could do my job was pretty exhausting, actually. And I reckon it probably took 3 or 6 months of energy, effort, exhaustion, before I was back to where I knew I was fairly comfortable doing what I needed to do, and people weren't saying to me all the time, are you sure you want to do that? And I wasn't worrying about whether I was going to be able to do or not. So that was a number of years ago, fortunately, and I did learn quite a lot out of it. It was pretty horrific, as you can probably imagine, but it was actually one of the best things that ever happened to me. I survived, fortunately. I'm probably a better person for the experience because I understand more about myself now. I'm better to read my ongoing signs and better able to manage my needs. Above all, I'm much better at asking for help, not trying to fix things myself, and at reaching out for support. But you've got to have that network that you feel you can trust to do that, which is pretty key. Hopefully, I'm still, or maybe even more capable of doing large and challenging roles at senior level in big organisations. I wanted to share this with you today because it's important that other people struggling as I did understand that there is help available and there is hope. I also wanted, because it's important to me that organisations understand that they can make a positive difference and have a positive influence on things. But I also wanted to recognise how vital the people around me were to me, and therefore how important that is as part of this for everybody else. So for me personally, and I think for the organisation, what we're doing today and over the next few months really matters. The work of organisations and campaigns like this, and like the other speakers have talked about, is incredibly valuable. And I'm really proud, absolutely delighted that DFID wants to be part of a better future for people struggling with mental illness. Thank you.